Peter Howitt, he was born in 1946 in Toronto in Canada. He got his PhD from 1973 at Northwestern University in the United States. He's currently a professor at Brown University in the United States. And Peter Howitt, he's the other half of the dynamic duo that created the theory of sustained growth through creative destruction. In terms of complementarity, he is the macroeconomist who brought the general equilibrium perspective into their model. He is widely regarded by his colleagues as kind, supportive, and wise, and is affectionately described by Philippe Aghion as his best friend. Please come up to the stage, Peter Howitt.
Thank you. Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you very much. I would also like to begin by thanking the Royal Swedish Academy of Science and the Nobel Economics Committee for this amazing honor. It is, of course, the dream of a lifetime to be standing here, and I will be eternally grateful. I'd also like to thank my whole family for being so supportive of my work over the years, and especially my wife, Pat. Part of her support, of course, is supporting me, but it goes way beyond that. She and Philippe teamed up to keep me working on growth theory long after I would have continued. I arrived at MIT that fateful year, and Philippe was disappointed to have arrived there. I was quite happy to arrive there, but I wasn't looking to work on growth theory. I was going to be doing some search theory and some theory of unemployment and something totally different. So it's just by chance that I got there. But I've always been the sort of economist that likes to just follow their nose. When something interests me, I start wandering away from whatever it was I used to be doing. And when I started talking with Philippe, I thought, well, that sounds pretty interesting. So I started wandering away from growth theory, from unemployment theory and search theory. And it was a tremendous collaboration. We knew at first that right away that we had something big on our hands, and we kept working on it. But over the years, as the years passed, I started finding other things that I got interested in too, and I started spending less time working with Philippe and more time doing other things. But whenever that would happen, Pat would get these phone calls from Philippe saying, Pat, tell Peter that what he's trying to do now isn't nearly as important as what he was doing. You know, he's like someone who thinks he's good at writing poetry, and that's what he wants to do, but what he's really good at is writing detective novels, and that's what he does with me, so bring him back. So, and Pat was smart enough to realize that, yes, Philippe is right, and so it's as much because of her as it is Philippe that I continued to do what I'm sure is the best work of my life. And thank you, both of you. A lot of what I'm going to be saying today is now familiar to you because you've heard a lot of it from Philippe. But I hope you don't mind a little bit of repetition, perhaps in a quieter voice. I don't know. It might help. When we began our work on innovation-based growth theory through creative destruction, it was almost 40 years ago now. And the state of the art in growth theory was, of course, embodied in the solo model that Philippe described. And there was nothing wrong with that model, except that it was seriously incomplete. You could use it to show how, because of diminishing returns, the economic growth could not be sustained without technological progress, continued technological progress. And in fact, you could show that in the long run, the rate of economic growth would actually equal the rate of technological progress appropriately defined. But it took the rate of technological progress as given, as something that was just not affected by anything going on in the economic system or anything motivated by economic objectives. And moreover, it was assumed that the technological progress sort of fell like manna from heaven on everyone below and benefited everyone more or less equally. All wages would go up at the same rate as a result of technological progress, and all businesses would become more productive at that rate. And of course, we know that neither of those is true. Technological progress comes to a large extent from innovations made by profit-seeking business firms. Businesses innovate in order to earn what we would call monopoly rents. They innovate in order to be able to produce goods that their rivals can't match. They innovate in order to produce goods at a lower cost than their rivals can do. And in both of those cases, what they're able to do is to charge prices above the cost of production and earn a supernormal profit without being profitably undercut by their rivals. So this is very much an economic motivation. And we also know, of course, that the gains don't fall uniformly on everyone. There are losses as well as gains. And that comes straight from the process that we talked about, the innovation process that I just described. Those who succeed in making innovations and being able to outdo their opponents gain profits. They hire workers to produce. Their workers get higher wages. But those who fail to innovate get displaced. They lose business, they lose profits. People who worked for them lose. And in general, that's of course Schumpeter's process of creative destruction. And that creative destruction is something that is shared by anyone whose economic fortunes are tied to technologies that are rendered obsolete by the new technologies that are driving economic growth. And creative destruction generates a conflict that's really at the heart of the growth process. The conflict between those who gain from the new technologies and those who lose because their fortunes are tied to older technologies. It's at the heart of the growth process because whether or not and how fast a country can grow will depend very much on how that conflict is resolved. Will those who gain from this creative destruction succeed and be allowed to implement their new technologies and so on? Or will those who would potentially lose manage to block the new innovations? There are a lot of things that influence that process. Now, you might wonder why it is that these ideas of Schumpeter, of creative destruction, that were enunciated in his 1942 book on capitalism, socialism, and democracy, still hadn't been incorporated into the mainstream of economic growth theory in 1987 when Philippe and I met. And it's a good question. I think there are a number of aspects to it, but I think that the main reason is that this process of competitive innovation and creative destruction involves some fairly complicated strategic conditions that had to be worked out in order to create a coherent mathematical model. And you imagine a market where some product is being produced and everyone knows that it's capable of being improved, not just once or twice, but any number of times. Someone might undertake to create the next generation of that product and earn some monopoly rents from it. But there'll be other people racing to do the same thing. And so how much you spend on hiring people to do research, to try to speed up the arrival of this new invention, to get it for yourself, will depend to some extent on how much other firms are racing to get to the same goal. The faster they race, the faster you might want to race. Or if they're very good, you might give up. It's a strategic situation where how much you're investing in it depends upon how much others are investing. How much they're investing will depend upon how much you are investing. And to figure out what's going to happen, you need to find some kind of a Nash equilibrium or something, where everyone's doing what they find most profitable given what the others are doing. And to make it more complicated, they've got to realize that if they succeed, if one firm succeeds in discovering generation X of the product, there are going to be other firms striving to come up with generation X plus 1 that will displace generation X. And the more you expect them to be spending on innovation, the faster they're going to do it, the shorter will be the duration of your profits that you'll get from having invented generation X, and the less the payoff will be to you. And so you have to take that into account. And you have to sort of put yourself in their position to figure out, well, they're going to be doing something like what we're doing, but that means that they have to consider what will be happening to people trying to come up with generation X plus 2, and so on and so forth. So it's a bit of a tricky situation. It's not impossible. It requires the use of some game theory. And back in those days, game theory was making tremendous advances, but largely in microeconomics. It was slow to come to macroeconomics. It was coming into some discussions of monetary policy and fiscal policy, but not into growth theory. Well, fortunately, where we met at MIT was also the home then to Jean Tirole, who was a master at using game theory in industrial organization theory. And he was at the time just putting the finishing touches on his magnificent book called The Theory of Industrial Organization, which had a whole chapter devoted to patent races, the sort of thing that we were talking about, but trying to put it into a macroeconomic model, which was a somewhat more difficult thing because there are just so many more moving parts in a general equilibrium system than in the system of an individual market. So what we did was we managed to, by studying these theories, we managed to find a way to model this this process of this, how this strategic situation would work out, and we managed to put it together into a macroeconomic model, a model that could then be used to go out to look at real-world data to see how big is this effect that affects economic growth, how big is that effect, what are the other things that could affect the incentive to innovate and so on, and would affect the rate of economic growth. So I'll just show you a little bit of what that model looks like. Philippe has already gone over it with you, but this is just my own little version of it, if I can actually come up with it. No, I guess not. Oh, I have the wrong clicker. All right, okay. There we are. There are two key variables here. One of them is the frequency of innovations. Actually, my notation, we didn't coordinate enough here. My notation's a little different than Philippe's. This is the overall frequency of innovations in the whole economy. And this is something that in our model is the result of firms trying to maximize their expected values, taking into account the strategic situation that I've just described, knowing that in order to innovate faster, they would have to hire more research workers. Those research workers had to be paid a wage that depended upon what they could also get in manufacturing industries. The model determined what that equilibrium wage was. It determined what the rate of profit you could expect as long as you had a monopoly would be. And firms would solve this strategic problem and come up with a frequency of innovations for the whole economy. And the other important model was the size of innovations, gamma. And it was, in some versions of our model, just taken as given, and others it was subject to the same sorts of considerations as lambda. And the only equation I'm going to show you is a very simple one here, which is that the rate of economic growth in the long run in this model was just the product of lambda, the frequency of innovations, and the log of gamma, which is a measure of the size of innovations. And there's nothing really surprising about this equation. It's really just saying that, if you like, the faster, if you want to run faster, which is what's on the left-hand side, you've either got to take longer strides or take them more often, and that's what it is. It was a simple model, but it provided a template that we could use to relax various simplifying assumptions, introduce new real-world complications to address a whole variety of issues. And over the years, we managed to use it to address how economic growth affects and is affected by, in turn, international trade, competition policy, education, the environment, population health, political economy, government fiscal policy, economic inequality, the patent system, and a lot of other things that many of which Philippe has already talked about. So I'd like to talk about a couple of those areas of application. The first one being competition policy. Schumpeter's view, when he wrote about creative destruction, was that because it's monopoly rents that motivate innovations, we should really be very gentle with antitrust policy. We should leave monopolies alone, let them enjoy their rents until someone replaces them, because the bigger the rents, the greater the incentive to innovate and capture some of those rents, and therefore the more growth the more innovation would take place, and the more growth would take place. And when in our very first model that we put together, that seemed to be the case. The higher Philippe showed a little parameter up there that measured the extent of that alpha that measured the extent of competition. The higher that was, the faster the growth rate would be. But as we started elaborating on the model, taking into account this step-by-step nature, the fact that the further away a leader in an industry could get technologically above the followers, the harder it would be for those followers to catch up. And the more competitive the situation, the better able a rival who might even be a little bit behind was able to capture some of your profits to compete against you effectively and diminish your profits, the more the incentive would be to try to escape competition by innovating even further, by increasing your lead. And when we modified the model to take that into account, we discovered, lo and behold, that when you took a look overall at at how these two countervailing forces worked out, it implied that depending on the other parameters of the model, you would either get a monotonically increasing relationship between the degree of competition and the equilibrium rate of growth, or you'd get this inverted U that Philippe talked about, where if you have very low levels of competition, raising competition would, through this escape competition, give you more growth. But at some point, as you approach such a high amount of competition that there were hardly any monopoly profits left, the Schumpeterian effect would start to come into effect. But as I say, under some circumstances, that Schumpeterian effect never dominated. And and before long, we teamed up with the team from UCL, wrote a paper with Nick Bloom and Richard Blundell and Rachel Griffith, using this marvelous data set that they'd put together with basically every publicly listed firm in the United Kingdom over a period of many years, with a lot of variables in there. And what we discovered there was that indeed, in the UK data, the relationship between, we looked at the degree of competition within each industry. And we found that indeed, looking across industries, at first, as you raised competition, you got more innovation, more patenting activity, more productivity growth from those firms. But eventually, it tailed off. So there was this inverted U-shaped relationship. And they also found that most of the firms in the sample were in industries on the upward sloping part of this relationship. So that overall, for economic growth, it was clear that more competition would stimulate growth. So the reason I like to talk about this particular application of our model is that it just is an illustration of how taking these old ideas of Schumpeter and putting them into a mathematical model that allows you to go to the data and do some econometrics can really teach you something that even a genius like Schumpeter hadn't really fully appreciated, and in fact sort of stood Schumpeter on its head. And so that's one thing that we were able to do. This finding of an inverted U has been discovered in many other countries, by the way, and not just in UK data. And in countries where it hasn't been found, what people tend to find for the most part is that there's just this strictly positive relationship between competition and innovation. So I think that's something that I'm proudest of having started the theoretical literature on this. It's also true, of course, and Philippe has mentioned some of this, that there's a lot of evidence that when you allow monopoly power to grow unchecked, that firms that have this power use it not just to continue innovating, but to try to suppress innovations by people that might make them the victims of creative destruction. There's evidence that firms have, in the industries that have become increasingly dominated in recent years by these superstar firms that have lots of funds at their disposal, that they have used such techniques as creating patent thickets, buying up patents from everywhere, so that anybody that tried to challenge them, their leadership, with a new technology would have to have the money to pay for all the legal expenses of defending themselves against suits of patent violation. They've engaged in preemptive mergers. When a rival gets to the point where it seems to be threatening the core business of one of these large companies, the best strategy often is not to try to compete against them, but to buy them out. You buy them out, and you can either direct their technological development in directions that are going to be complementary with the trajectory that you're on, or you could even just suppress the innovations. You don't have to worry about them anymore. And that's going on an awful lot. And of course, you can use your monopoly powers to influence politicians. The more politicians are swayed by contributions and various other favors, the more you're going to get policies that are in your favor. And you can also use it to help capture the regulatory authorities and move things in your direction, and to win public opinion in support of your efforts to suppress. They're not put that way, but in order to favor your continuing progress. And there is a lot of evidence, and Philippe talked about it quite a bit, that the fairly sluggish growth that's been experienced in many countries for the last 20 years, a lot of it can be attributed to this increase in unchecked monopoly power. So the other area that I'd like to talk about is patent policy. This closely related to that. It's clear that patent policies are important for a lot of innovations. If you can't appropriate the rents, if your invention can be copied immediately by anybody else, there's no profitability from having come up with it. It's also important that patent policies have, in most countries, have full disclosure laws. In order to get a patent for something, you've got to provide a clear and unambiguous description of what it is and make it publicly available, and that allows other people to build on those inventions. But as I said before, patent laws can be used also to block laggards, and so it's important to have a finite length to patents, and it's especially important because firms can get into this very unlevel situation where you've got a leader that dominates and the laggards are far behind. And in that situation, that's where the least incentive is to innovate. The laggards are discouraged from catching up because they're so far behind, and the leaders don't really have to worry about escaping competition. The competition is too far behind. And so breaking those up can lead to the kind of explosion of creative activity that you got, for example, when the 70-year-old monopoly of the AT&T Corporation was broken up in the mid-90s, and that led to this huge flurry of competitive, innovative activity in the telecommunications industry in the US. International commerce is another area where I think we've made a lot of had a lot of effect. And basically, what we know about the effect of international trade on innovation and growth is what we know from competition. Opening up to international trade is opening up to competition, and I think that's probably all I'll say about that right now. I just want to say one word about generative artificial intelligence, something that everybody thinks about when they hear about creative destruction nowadays, and they think about the possibility. Like any general purpose technology that we've observed, there is tremendous possibility for both the replacement of skills, and for also the enhancement of skills and the opening up of new skills. But like any general purpose technology, it's going to take a long time and require a lot of downstream innovations to be realized. For generations, some of the best economists in the world have expressed deep concerns about technological unemployment, going back from David Ricardo through John Maynard Keynes, even up to Paul Samuelson. So far, history has shown that these predictions of high unemployment and low wages haven't been true. Wage income has tended to grow in proportion to national income as we've progressed. I do worry a little bit about AI. Generative AI has the potential to displace a significant number of jobs because it automates not only the routine, repetitive tasks, but also complex cognitive work that was once thought to require uniquely human judgment. As models become capable of producing high-quality text, images, software code, and analytical outputs, entire segments of knowledge-based occupations, from customer support to administrative roles to journalism, marketing, and parts of the legal and financial system, face the substantial risk of restructuring or outright redundancy. You've probably guessed, because Joel's already done that. That was written by ChatGPT, not by me. Okay? I thought it was, I didn't change a word. I asked it to write a paragraph on the job-destroying potential of generative artificial intelligence. I think it's pretty good for a first draft, written in about 5 seconds by a 3-year-old who's growing up very rapidly into something that, well, we don't know. And so the future is worrisome. We don't have a lot of historical evidence about these really disruptive, revolutionary general-purpose technologies. People that count the Kondratiev cycles or techno-economic paradigm shifts, different scholars call them different things, will claim that, well, there have been about 5 of them, and this is the 6th one. Well, that's just too small a sample to know what's going on. So we have, I tend to believe that the lessons of economic history will persist, even though I know that we're dealing with a very small sample, and we're dealing with something that looks unique in many ways, but only time will tell. So far, so good. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you so much. You stay on the stage. All the laureates come to the stage. Thank you so much, Peter Howitt. Now let's welcome all the laureates for 2025 Year's Prize in Economic Sciences. Peter Howitt, Philip Aghion, Joel Mokyr,